So the very first thing that we do is what we think every good salesperson should do, is really research their client and find out about what's the need of the individual. How can we tie in what we do with what they're looking for? Almost universally, that's what we find, not just in New Zealand though, also in the UK and Australia. I think it's a habit people get into where they get very enthusiastic about the business that they represent. And because of that, that enthusiasm spills into a meeting with a client prematurely, when in fact what they need to be doing, and obviously what we're teaching them to do, is ask the questions that will lead the client to discover that's what they need through that self-evaluation. So if they're asking good questions, they can help the client uncover a need, and that's what they can then fulfill with all that enthusiasm. But often they get it the wrong way around. When we interview our clients, we do it on camera. So we then play back that client on video, audio, visual, in the classroom environment, and it's the client saying, if they would just learn a little bit more about what my organisation is trying to achieve, then they would be more able to help me. They would be able to do more for me if they would. So that's the type of thing that they say. Or I'm over people coming in here telling me that their service is better, but what does that mean to me? It has no relevance to me. Or they come in here and they want to chat, or to, that I don't want a cup of coffee and a muffin conversation. I want something that helps my business grow. I don't need more friends. I need somebody who's going to help me. All about the client. Without a client, you don't have a market. And without a market, you don't have a successful product or service, as you know. Seek advice wherever you can. Be curious, consistently curious, because that's how they're going to build their knowledge, full stop. But be consistently curious, and anyone that they know who runs any form of business, I would be asking them about their story, because that will build up stories for their own future. So whether it's someone who runs the local dairy to a relative who might have a steel business, it actually doesn't matter, just to try and learn about what they did to get there and what worked and what didn't. When you have an entrepreneurial idea, of course you need to test it, but whatever it is, find out what the customer wants, whether it's online and you're just doing consistent surveys to find out what they want, or whether it's in person, asking people, you've got to find out what's the issue they want solved so that your product or service can help meet it. A recent survey by the Customer Service Institute in the UK, an inspiring name, discovered that one of the trends that's happened is that people have gone from thinking that online is the answer to everything, that's what I want to do, to wanting a more personalised service. People are frustrated somewhat by online experiences. So what we're often helping our client organisations do is make sure that when they decide to interact with a human being, that human experience is really productive, that the person that they're talking to is able to make decisions, is capable, knowledgeable, able to make decisions. So there isn't a long process in trying to get an answer to a query or problem. So you need a human element in your business. Even if it's a brand new business and you're doing things online, you need a human element where you can, with people that you can absolutely trust, to have empathy with the customer, but provide solutions and be driven to succeed, to turn that into a really brilliant experience for the client. Possibly, there is a shift away from apps. So not from that research I just mentioned, but I just heard secondhand, but I heard from someone else where we were co-presenting to a large client developing some apps, that there is app fatigue, so that people have condensed the amount of apps that they have on their phone from the 40 that they might have had 3 years ago to the ones that they use most and trust, and they're getting rid of others. So I think, like everything else, before anyone develops an app, they need to ensure that there's a need that's going to be sufficiently useful for people not to delete. The advice that I would give would be to overcome nerves, which I'm sure that they will have in these presentations, is naturally to prepare really well. It's not going to be any surprise that I'm saying this, but to prepare really well and plan that presentation so they know what they want to get across. But throughout the presentation, rather than thinking, I have to deliver this and I have to impress people, to rather think, what's the key message I want the people on the other side of this table to understand, rather than a verbatim presentation. What are the key messages I want them to get? Why is what we're doing different? How have we researched this? What is it about what we've got that's different to anything else that's currently in the market, and why do we believe that's going to work? I mean, there might be other components that you need from them, but really think about what's the message I want to get across, rather than delivering a presentation that they prepared. It's that people want to hear that this adds up, that it makes sense. And the other thing I would suggest is that they think, if I was the dragon's den, what are the 20 questions that I might ask? Absolutely prepare for those, because that won't be hard to do. So if you Google planning for a presentation, you'll get plenty of advice, and most of it will be pretty good, and most of it will focus on that plan, prepare and practice, because that's what's going to make it really effective. But you can't shortcut it. You've got to have done all that work in order for it to stand up. A presentation on its own, as you know, isn't going to cut it. It's got to be backed by a really solid, well thought through idea, and they should accept that they've got gaps in their knowledge that they're going to perhaps fill after that presentation. There'll be things they still don't know, perhaps, that they know they need to do more research on following it. If it's possible, and I realise this might not be, but depending on their resources, but even if they are videoing friends in their living rooms, I would include video if it's humanly possible. And the reason I would say that is because it adds another voice to the presentation. So how long have they got for the presentation?
Probably 20 minutes max.
So if they chunk that into 4 lots of 5 minutes before they get the questions, I would think about involving, if it's having some facts that they're basing the research on, bringing that to life with some video of people talking about why this idea works or might work, or what the problem is that they're hoping to fulfill. Some visuals about what this is going to look like, and ideally I'd like them to post some questions, and I don't know if they'll have that opportunity to ask you questions, but the best presentations involve the audience, as you know. So if they are able to ask questions, if they have to be rhetorical, then they have to be rhetorical, but if they're allowed to ask questions that you can answer, that's certainly going to get the engagement of the people they're presenting to. So even perhaps this is good advice even beyond this presentation, if they're presenting to others, you want the audience engaged and involved. And you need what's called a status change within that presentation. So the status change is when it moves from just being all about you presenting to watching a PowerPoint perhaps with interesting facts, or watching a video of somebody, or involving the audience. All of that brings it to life. Overcome the fear by preparing endlessly and preparing without notes. So I think it's sometimes wise for somebody who is shy or lacking in confidence to write down everything they intend to say and learn it, but then deliver it without that prop. So get used to delivering it, but really thinking about the key message and walking out of there feeling I absolutely got that message across, I sold it, rather than, as I said before, memorizing it, but also using props that will back it. Yeah, absolutely do both. Get over the fear with the preparation, enhance the presentation by adding more weight to it. Because I like to think that every time you're presenting to anyone ever, in your mind's eye, imagine that they have a checkbox on their forehead. And as you walk in the room, they think, tick, this person arrived on time, looking prepared, looking the part of whoever it is they're to play today. And tick, they told us what they're doing here and what they want to achieve by the end of this presentation. You know, I had a sort of agenda. I know what they want to do. And tick, they introduced what they're trying to achieve really eloquently. Tick, they put facts and figures behind that. Tick, they made it visual and exciting. Tick, they completed this presentation with an appeal. Will you back me? So close the sale. Ask for a commitment. They may not be able to provide it you on the day, but ask for it. Make it clear that you have conviction. And we show we have conviction in our ideas by asking for a commitment. So think of the people in front of you as having that checkbox. Get those ticks. I think if they feel confident enough about their idea to go and present it to people personally, that's obviously ideal. It's less expensive, they believe in it, they know it, they understand it. If they don't, they can either contract somebody who can help them develop that skill or to do it on their behalf. What I would say is to be very careful about who they pick to do that. And in choosing someone to do it, I would at any interview of any salesperson, any time, I would ask them to create and deliver a presentation to your entrepreneur that shows how they would go about promoting their product. They've got to see, yeah, would I believe this person? Would I want to buy from them? Would I see that this person's got a planned approach? So if they're going to use an external resource to help them sell their idea to others, really test it, because it's very easy to be persuaded by someone who's personable and enthusiastic. That's not necessarily enough. Ask them some tough questions, and you'll find those. Google how to ask great questions. Yes, I think because it is more than an idea, it's about everything else. It's about them having researched, is there validity here? Is there a need to fulfill? Is there a way to deliver it that's cost effective? Is it up against, is it going to fare well against the competition? They've got to have done all that piece first, which I'm sure they'll be learning about through this program. So if they've done all of that work so that it stands up, then that final component is, but how am I actually, what's my vehicle going to be? Is it through me? Is it through other people? Is it online? What's the total package here? I think there's definitely things that you can teach anyone with entrepreneurial characteristics, which I'll come back to. I think you can teach somebody with those characteristics how to manage a business more effectively, because to grow, to be more than just an independent individual entrepreneur with a great idea, but to grow you have to have systems and processes, and they often don't come as naturally to an entrepreneur, so you can certainly teach people how to do that. I think the bottom line question for somebody thinking about going into business on their own is, do they have the temperament that can cope with uncertainty? And some people thrive on that uncertainty. I certainly do. But other people much prefer that predictability of working for someone else and adding to their organisation in phenomenal ways. But if you're going to be entrepreneurial, you have to live in a different way. Whereas I think you mentioned earlier, going from 40 hours a week working for someone else and working for yourself, and suddenly it might be 80 or 100 hours a week for a really variable income until you hit that jackpot or that line where it becomes really profitable and you've got the formula right, and that's where you need so much help around you to get that formula right. But that passion and desire to do something for yourself, if you really feel that's you, it's worth learning all those other skills. I think some people know, and I'm one of them, that I couldn't work for someone else. I couldn't work now for an organisation. I think if you know that about yourself, you've actually then got to accept you're going to have to learn a lot of process skills to get you to the next level. Yes, and I think people are particularly willing to help young people. So if you're 23 with a great idea and a passion for hard work, if people see that you've got that work ethic behind it and you're appealing for help, I think you'll find so much help within New Zealand. And people know people, as you've said, so ask everyone you know if they know anyone who, and you will find people that will help. I know in moving for myself at 28 from the UK to New Zealand and working in media and not knowing anyone, I had to do that in order to grow and develop, and people were incredibly helpful. It was a shock after London that somebody would say, yes, just come and have a coffee with me, and there didn't seem to be anything in it for them, you know, they were just prepared to have a coffee and a discussion. So I think make the most of that opportunity. Yeah. The secret formula for selling successfully is to ask much more than you talk. Ask your way to the sale. So if you're meeting with somebody to learn, or you're meeting with somebody to sell them something, actually the process is still the same, because if you go into every meeting with a prospective client with a few key objectives, you will inevitably come out with something. So if you go out thinking, I really believe in what I do, what the industry or the product that I've developed, I really believe in that. And if you go in really wanting to help somebody by using that product, then all you have to do is go in with lots of open-ended questions. So that's the whole who, what, how, why, where, and tell me more. Tell me how you currently manage this aspect of your business or your life, and tell me what the problems are with that. So look for the pain points so that you can help somebody with your product have a solution to that pain, amplify the pain, so that you can show them how you can solve a problem. If they don't have a challenge or a problem, if you can't help make them more money or save money, or you can't help them save time or be more or have higher productivity, if you're selling business to business, it's unlikely they're going to be interested. Most business people are obviously not just going to want to have something that's cool. They want something that fulfills one of those objectives, makes them money, saves them money, gives them more productivity, or potentially just makes them feel fabulous about who they are and what they do. From an advertising background, you'd know. So it's really simple in process, but quite difficult to do because it's not instinctive. As human beings, there was no real evolutionary advantage for us in asking lots of questions, so we tended not to evolve as such as humans. So that's why it has to be learned. It's a learned skill. But if you can learn it at 23, you'll have it for life and it will serve you well forever.
I think sales has become much more sophisticated, and somebody said to me many years ago, it's all about getting down to a marketplace of one, which I think is a really nice line. And what that to me means is find out what that particular customer wants, because that particular customer will have a slightly different need to another type of customer. Now, if you talk about sales skills, it becomes pretty broad, and I think it's different for different types of organisations. I got involved last year in a consulting process with a company that had lost $7 million pitches in a row. So I came in and sat down with them for a half a day just to find out what was going wrong. What was really interesting to me was there was nothing wrong with their team, there was nothing wrong with their proposals, but the sales process they were going through, they weren't interacting with the customer enough. So by the time they were presenting, they didn't know as much about the customer they were presenting to. To a degree, they took the customer for granted. Whereas I'm a big believer in the sales process and constantly going back to the customer. You've said you want this, is that right? If we give you this, and this answer, does that satisfy you on that particular point? And constantly doing that. When I worked for Xerox, which was my very first job out of university, they used to say that a proposal is one of two things. It's a confirmation of a conversation you've already had, or it's the presentation of some information that you've had trouble getting to the boss in any other way. And what you ideally want your sales presentation to be is a confirmation of the conversation you've already had. That we're selling, a thing, a chunky, boxy thing. And so the sales process in that case, to me, is something where you're having face-to-face conversations with people on the way through. Of course, we now live in a world where you can go onto Amazon and order anything as a customer, and it gets delivered tomorrow or the day after. So sales is changing from what I would like to call a proactive process where organisations go out and sell, to in many cases a reactive process where the customer's just out there, the product is everywhere, and the customer buys it as they will. But in the traditional sales methods, I think that constant interaction with the customer on the way through the sales cycle. So by the time you've actually got a decision or got a deal, you both know what you're getting. So a lot of people will think selling is where somebody actually buys a product or a service. But if you think about your class and they're going out with a new idea, they've got to sell the idea. They've got to sell it to the people who can help them make it. They've got to sell the idea to some of the people who might fund it. They've got to sell the idea to the people who might want to come and work for them. They've got to sell the idea to distribution partners around the world. And then they've actually got to find some customers. So they've already been selling all the way through. And that's the beauty of a startup. You get lots of practice before you touch a customer. Look, I think a good salesperson is somebody first and foremost who have got people skills and relationship skills. And they're, whilst a lot of people might think they're the same thing, they're slightly different. People skills mean it's people who find it easy to sit down and have a conversation with other people. Relationship skills means you're still talking to that person in 12 months' time. So I think people skills, relationship skills, and then, you know, a big part of selling is the ability to tell a story. And one of the things I worry about the digital generation that we've got into, you know, we don't tell jokes anymore. We actually read jokes on our phones, or we watch a video of a joke on our phones, but we don't tell jokes. So I think there's a real risk that the art of being able to tell a story will get lost in this generation. I think a lot of that automated call centre stuff has been put in place to save time and save money. But what nobody seems to have got their head around is the damage that you're doing to your customer relationships.
So sales capability is probably the most important capability within a business. You know, without sales, nothing happens. So it's got to be your sharpest tool, and you need people who are really good at sales. And like marketing, it needs to come at the front of the company. Same with sales. So developing strategy, you know, it needs you need to understand your route to market, who the key influencers are. You do need a bit of science, somewhat of a science to dissect the market and figure out who's actually leading, you know, behaviours, who are the influencers, who are going to build this brand for you if they adopt it as their own. And then that's kind of the intuition on what's going to drive a sales strategy. And then there's the more numeric need of what's going to drive a sales strategy. Okay, well, how many bars are there? How many people are serving cocktails? How much vodka's going there? Therefore, we need to get X. So there's, you know, and that will drive your sales strategy. Especially understanding your customer. It's a cliche, but understand them as a person, their market, their background, their stresses, their opportunities, their life goals, all those types of things. As sales, there's a huge amount of psychology in sales, and smart salespeople can read people pretty well.
I think the best idea that we had in the 42 days that demonstrates this extremely well was an idea that Geoff had, which I wasn't convinced about at the time, and I'm to my lasting shame, which was the Vodka University, where Geoff enlisted the help of a very cool young lawyer called Jacob Brice, who became the vodka professor. And his job was, with a bottle and a business card and, as you've just said, knowledge, to go out into the world and to run tutorials. And we never operated, and we still don't with Moa, in an anti-competitive fashion. So he would put all the vodkas out on display, and he would talk to the properties of each like he was presenting different wines to an audience. And he was on BBC television shows. He would guest bartend in Soho House and Bungalow 8, the hottest bars in the world. And he became widely respected. He became really the first brand ambassador for a super premium, yeah. I think any brand really. It was certainly in the global liquor industry. He broke through pretty much every barrier, all that sort of snobbery, and he became a famous mixologist, and he still is working for Bacardi.
That came from selling, actually. I was in London late at night, been getting a lot of no's from, you know, uptight London bartenders all day, but what I did get a lot of was that they were all quite intrigued about New Zealand. They'd heard about it, a lot of them wanted to go there. So it was on the walk home at 1 in the morning thinking, how could we use that to actually benefit 42 Below? So that's when we created a competition. If you poured 42 Below in your bar, if you created 42 Below cocktails, if your cocktail was selected, you would represent your country in a world cocktail competition. So you could be with Team Great Britain, flying to New Zealand for the World Cocktail competition, Cocktail World Cup. That in itself wasn't particularly unique. There were other cocktail competitions worldwide, but what we did is we did it a New Zealand way. So the first thing people did when they got to Queenstown, we had it in Queenstown, was they had to make a cocktail whilst bungee jumping. And then straight after that, they had to mix a martini whilst in the shot over jet. So that was putting a New Zealand solution to a kind of a sales problem, really.
Vodkas at the time in New York City were paying, having launch parties with hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars that were more expensive than our marketing budget for an entire year.
For the whole world,
So we couldn't compete with those budgets, and so we had to come up with ideas that would help us sell not only the vodka but ourselves and the culture of us and our story to the world.
Yeah, the other bit, just on the relationship piece there, is I think often inventors or entrepreneurs or the traders or the techie people aren't actually very good at building relationships, and they often think that, you know, I'll get the cheesy sales guy to go and sell that product, or I'll, you know, get a marketing team, or I'll have someone else, you know, distribute my cool idea. The problem with that is, in the early phases of getting going, the client only wants to talk to the inventor, or only wants to talk to the boss, or only wants to talk to the guy that came up with it. And if that's sort of like super nerdy, geeky in the corner that doesn't want to talk to a customer, then the whole thing fails. So unfortunately, the only way forward really is for the entrepreneur, inventor to learn skills on how to build relationships and sell your product and have that chat, because it's kind of not really a sort of a not negotiable item, I think. Oh, I think it's everything. It's absolutely, we've seen so many amazing ideas that just don't get sold well, or we've even watched all those Dragon Den movies, haven't we? And it's kind of like, oh, dude, you blew at that, you know? Might be the best idea in the world, but you haven't quite got your elevator pitch succinct and to the point and crisp. Or so I have a little acronym called CALL that I talk to about building relationships. And so CALL is you know, CALL. It's actually 5 things. The first thing is C, is connect. So connecting to me is, you know, obviously do it electronically these days on LinkedIn, Facebook and all that kind of stuff, and that's good, but just because you've got 1,000 Facebook friends doesn't really mean that you're connected. You know, connecting is to really figure out who your end customer and client is and really have a proper, you know, connection point there. The A is anticipation, and I think we go into so many meetings where we don't really anticipate what that client really wants out of us or our product. You know, often we go to, I'm sure you and I have done this over the years, we've gone to cocktail parties and there happens to be 50 people there, and you sort of say g'day and you leave, but you haven't really thought, well, who's going to be there and what could I help them and how could they help me? And it's just, you haven't anticipated the event well enough. You know, the great CEOs go into those cocktail parties, just about touch everyone, make them all feel good and leave, and they can only do that because they've really anticipated you know, their next hour. And I think anticipating our business is how my in the Apple case, how my phone is going to make someone's world cool and really look at it through their lens. Is the first L is to leverage. That's sort of my whole relationship key, I think. I don't think it should ever be a cold call. If you're going to go somewhere to sell your new widget to someone, or to sort of, then I literally believe through social media and all of our friend networks, you can just about warm that whole thing up before you even go and do it. So leveraging family, friends, networks, other people in the university, to try and leverage your chance of success rather than just sort of going in one-on-one. And then my last L is actually listen. I think particularly blokes were hopeless at that. But just so many sales calls, or so many sort of, when you're selling your idea, you go in with your little story in your head and you bash it out in your 5 minutes and you think you've done it, where actually some of those sales pitches where you just ask a couple of smart questions and sit back and listen. Yeah, you know, if you're selling, you're not selling normally, and if you just sort of sit back and kind of let it flow. And then the last one is actually call. No one calls these days. We all just send emails or Snapchats or goodness knows what else, but we don't actually call up and have a proper conversation with people. And I think if you're an entrepreneur starting out, you've got to call and talk to people, and making that first call and having a real call rather than just pinging a note is how we get going. The other amazing acronym we've touched on, Kevin Robertson, he's written that book recently, 64 Shots. And there's a great thing that he thinks the key to an amazing entrepreneur is the 4 Qs. So it's IQ, So you have to be smart, and you've got to have a good idea, and you've got to be clever at what you do. EQ is the next one. So that's that listening, it's understanding the client and having strong EQ. TQ is the third one, so that's kind of like trust quotient. So you have to be trusted. It has to be a good product where you can build a level of trust. And then the fourth Q is BQ, be quick. And the markets are moving pretty quick these days, and if you spend too many years getting your idea, dotted and T's crossed, the idea will move on, or someone else has done it. So if we're not quick, so IQ, EQ, BQ, and TQ are the four Qs to business success.